We normalize. Could you imagine pedophilia being normalized? Can you imagine pedophilia being normalized or pedophiles playing the victim? That mentality is right around the corner, where pedophiles are, I don't know, maybe they're identifying as a child, because if gender can be a social construct, why can't age be a social construct? Hello and welcome to A Plea to Humanity, a podcast dedicated to transferring power back to the people. My name is Corbin Sable, and in this episode, I want to talk about how the Democratic Party is not what you think it is. It is not this party of love and inclusivity and tolerance. In fact, it is oftentimes the opposite. Now, this isn't to say the Republican Party is the answer. Of course, I rag on the Republican Party a lot. It has its flaws. It's inept. It's corrupt. But the Democratic Party is not what you think it is. And that's the theme of this episode, episode 12. We're going to get into that. But first, I want to cover a few tweets that I wanted to highlight. So we'll start with this tweet from me, actually. And I want to say so let's just go over the tweet. So stop referring to the people that run this world as the elites. Instead, let's call them for what they really are. Psychopaths, leeches, morons. When we, the people, work hard and do what is right, do what is right, what we all know is right, we are the elites. Let's reclaim that title. So yeah, oftentimes we might refer to the people, the billionaires, the millionaires, the affluent people, those who are making the decisions as the elites. But what does elite mean? Why are we giving them that name, that title of that positive title, that amazing title is elite? They're not elite. What does it mean to be elite to you? To be elite to me is you're always doing what's right. Maybe you're super physically fit. You're an athlete or something like that. You have morals. You have high standards. You're full of integrity and honor. To me, that's what being elite is. But the people that run this world, they are not that. They are greedy. They are narcissists. They are psychopaths, most of them. And these are the people that are running the world. So why are we giving them the title as elite? Let's flip that script. Let's turn that around and reclaim that title for ourselves, for the people who are doing what is right, what we know is right. When we, the people, are doing what is right, what we know is right, we are the elites, not them. Let's call them for what they really are. Psychopaths, morons, leeches, greedy narcissists, abusers. They're not elite. We are. Let's reclaim that title. Moving on, I also want to share another tweet from me. Things start to make a lot more sense when you realize most of our politicians are either activists or some greater cause or representatives for a corporation or both. And this is one thing that I've started to realize recently, is that we don't have politicians in public office these days. We have activists and we have representatives for corporations or both in public. Most of them. I would say the vast majority of people that we refer to as politicians are not politicians. They're either, like I just said, activists for some greater cause or representatives for some corporations. And just like when we stop calling them elites, if we stop calling them politicians and start calling them corporate representatives or activists instead, that's how we can use language against the power structure, the ruling class, right? Again, the ruling class, which transcends both political parties. This is not a right versus left podcast. This is all about transferring power back to the people. So if we reclaim the title as elites and start calling them psychopaths and narcissists and leeches and no good people, right? If we start calling them corporate representatives or activists instead of politicians, we could start transferring power back to the people by using language against them, right? So they're not politicians, they're corporate representatives. They're not elites, they're narcissists, they're psychopaths, okay? Now I want to share this comic that I suppose is intended to be funny, but it's actually true. It's actually a real representation of what's happening. Look at this comic. How to flash in the woke era. So we got this dude who's flashing and goes, ha, woman guarding her children, saying pervert, and the dude is arrested for indecent exposure. Oh, but if he does the exact same thing and he says, I'm trans, and the lady protected her woman says pervert, she is arrested for hate speech, bigotry, and turf discrimination. This is a comic, but this is actually a real representation of what's happening. All right, I wrote about, so I want to be very clear. I don't want to dismiss how people feel. I understand there's people out there suffering from gender dysphoria, people that were born as a boy or born as a girl and see themselves as the opposite gender. I understand those feelings are real and I empathize with that. That's empathy 101. But just because somebody feels a certain way, it doesn't make them something else. So I wrote about it in one of my recent Substacks. Go to substack.corbinsable.com and you can check out my Substack about this issue. The message that's going on, the message about what you need to hear about the transgender controversy and what this could lead to if we start to affirm somebody who feels a certain way as something that's true. What could that possibly lead to? And we're going to get into what it will lead to, what they want it to lead to in the next tweet that I'm going to share with you from Gays Against Groomers. But this is more than just accepting people as how they feel. I want to accept people how they feel. I understand that. But one thing that needs to be understood is that gender dysphoria is the only dysphoria or only mental illness that we affirm. Why is that? We don't affirm anorexia as true. We don't go to the person suffering from anorexia and say, oh yeah, you really are fat, you need to lose more weight. Absolutely not. So why do we go to the person who is a male, who thinks he is a woman? Why do we go to that person and say, oh yeah, you really are a woman and you need to have surgery and hormones? Why do we do that? Well, I mean, the reasoning behind that is because there's money involved with that and there's profit to be made by issuing drugs and doing the surgeries and having somebody addicted on drugs for life. That's how big pharma becomes profitable. So that's the reason why we're affirming these as to be true, these mental disorders. But yes, gender dysphoria is the only mental disorder that we affirm to be true. We don't affirm anorexia or obesity or anything like that, or schizophrenia as true. We don't say to the schizophrenic that, yeah, they really do have somebody talking to them, that their voices in their head are a real person. So this is actually happening, and I wrote about it in my Substack. And for those local here to San Diego, here at Santee, or in Santee in the San Diego area, there was a man who thinks he is a woman, who goes by it as a transgender woman, a man, at the end of the day, is a man going in the woman's locker room. No big deal, right? Naked in the woman's locker room. But because this person is trans, it's okay. It's okay, right? No, it is not okay. It is not okay. Now, we're going to get into the next tweet I'm going to show you is going to explain why this is such an important issue for people out there that are saying this is a non-issue, this culture war BS. We need to be focusing on bigger issues like our debt and our reckless spending. I agree. I agree 100% that this seems like a non-issue culture war issue, but it's definitely not a non-issue, as you're going to see right now in this tweet from Gays Against Groomers. If a child can consent to irreversibly changing their body, what can't they consent to? There's a new slippery slope at play here, and it leads directly to kids being able to consent to sex with adults. Gender ideology is a Trojan horse to pedophilia. Gender ideology is a Trojan horse to pedophilia. That is 100% correct, and that is 100% why this is an issue that we need to put a stop to it, put an end to it. We need to crush this ideology for what it is. And Michael Knowles, he got attacked for wanting to eradicate transgender ideology. Those are his words exactly, and he got accused of wanting to kill transgender people and commit genocide to transgender people. That's absolutely not true. His words were he wants to eradicate transgender ideology, which I tend to agree with. That doesn't mean I am dismissing the feelings of others. That doesn't mean I want to do any harm to anybody. Absolutely not. Love comes first. I love all people. Love comes first. Love is love, right? But that doesn't mean we affirm mental disorders as real. And we need to understand that this whole transgender ideology, like Gays Against Groomers said, is a Trojan horse to pedophilia. That is why this is an important issue and not a non-issue culture war nonsense, blah, 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 that needs to be dismissed. It is an issue. We need to address it, and we need to take it seriously, just like our reckless spending, just like our national debt and our banks collapsing and everything. It is just as serious. It's on the same level as seriousness as that. Because if we normalize, could you imagine pedophilia being normalized? Can you imagine pedophilia being normalized, or pedophiles playing the victim? That mentality is right around the corner, where pedophiles are, I don't know, maybe they're identifying as a child, because if gender can be a social construct, why can't age be a social construct? We are a few steps away, 1 or 2 steps away from pedophilia being normalized, from pedophiles being forced into society, forcing their acceptance into society. And if you don't accept pedophilia, you're the bigot. That's where we're headed. And that's why we need to stop this, because that's where we're headed. So, one more tweet before we get into the whole why the Democratic Party is not what you think it is. I want to share another tweet with you. Just because I don't want the government to take care of the needy doesn't mean I want to abandon those in need. In fact, I'd argue that less people in need are being helped when it is the government's job to help the needy with programs such as welfare. So I want to help the needy, but I want to abolish welfare at the same time. Like I said, in fact, I'd argue that less people in need are being helped when it is the government's job to help the needy, such as programs such as welfare or any types of government assistance and handouts and entitlement programs. Less people are being helped when the government takes this responsibility. More people can be helped for cheaper, I would argue, if the government was out of the picture completely. One of my replies to this tweet from Rob, I take it from the Christian view in that it is my responsibility to be charitable, not to pass off charity to the state or to the government. When the state takes from the people, that's socialism, Marxism. When people freely give to the charity, one is good and the other is theft. Yeah, that's correct. And then I replied, yes, that is correct, but now we are so overtaxed and so overregulated, it is difficult to be wealthy and to not only build wealth for ourselves, but pass on that wealth to others. Not only our children to build generational wealth, but it's difficult to be charitable these days. Look at all these taxes and regulations that's impeding our ability to build wealth for ourselves. So it makes it difficult to not only build generational wealth and pass that wealth on to our children, but to be charitable. To be charitable, and for so long now, the idea, the notion that it's that the responsibility of being charitable for so long now has been passed on to the government. It's the government's job to be charitable and look out for the needy, not us. So that is why we need to abolish welfare. I want to abolish welfare so more people can be helped. So more people in need can be helped. That's why we need to abolish welfare. So now we are going to get into the crux of this podcast and why the Democratic Party is not what most people think it is. I want to be very clear with labels and things like this, and left and liberal and right and Democrat and Republican. I mean, these are all labels that are strategically meant to divide us and distract us. Remember, a label to you might mean something completely different to me. So liberal to you might mean something different to me. Left, right, conservative, liberal, Republican, Democrat to you might mean something completely different to me. So for this next segment of this podcast, I want to be very clear that I'm not, when I say things like left and liberal and Democrat, what I'm referring to are the leeches that I said at the very beginning of this podcast, those psychopaths, the people out there that we currently refer to as the elites, the ruling class, that we need to refer to as psychopaths and leeches and morons instead. That's who I'm referring to for the remainder of this podcast. I'm not attacking any ideology. I'm not saying that liberalism is bad or left is bad or things like that, because again, there's a lot of people out there who think liberalism is like freedom, intolerance, and inclusivity, and which I agree with. Which all of this is why we need to get rid of labels, right? Because they just distract us, they just divide us, they just confuse us, and they serve us no purpose. We need to get rid of labels to transfer power back to the people. So the Democratic Party, or the people that are running the Democratic Party these days, are Marxists. They're Marxists, and why they are Marxists is because this quote from Karl Marx: accuse your enemy of what you are doing as you are doing it to create confusion. One more time. Accuse your enemy of what you are doing as you are doing it to create confusion. So who's the enemy in this example? It's anybody that's opposed to these people that are running this country and this world. The people that are running the Democratic Party, some people that are running the Republican Party. Confuse the enemy of what you're doing as you are doing it to create confusion. So the enemy could be Republicans, the enemy could be libertarians, the enemy could be independents, the enemy could just be everyday average Americans that are opposing the agenda of this globalist ruling class that are filled with psychopaths, leeches, and morons. So that's the Karl Marx quote, and we're going to go over a few things of what they're doing. The most important, the most fascinating one that they accuse their enemy of, which they are of themselves, is fascism. Or Nazis, but fascism, right? We constantly hear from the Democratic Party that the right and the Republicans are fascists, when they themselves are the fascists. So one more time, that quote from Karl Marx: accuse your enemy of what you are doing as you are doing it to create confusion. So fascism is one example. We're going to go over a few more examples. They are the fascists. I'm going to tell you why. But yet they accuse their enemy of being the fascists to create confusion. So fascism is a far-right authoritarian ultranationalist political ideology and movement characterized by a dictatorial leader, centralized autocracy, militarism, forcible suppression of opposition, belief in natural social hierarchy. I'll stop right there. So I want to take away that far right label definition within fascism. That's just a label within a label. Fascism being one label and far right being another label. I want to focus on a few of these other words. I also want to. We'll wait for that. So authoritarian. If you were to look at the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, I would say both have authoritarian tendencies. But if you were to weigh the scales, the Democratic Party is far more authoritarian than the Republican Party. By far. Absolutely. So just look at the COVID lockdowns. Yes, all but one Republican governor didn't lock down. So Kristi Noem was the only Republican governor that didn't lock down. But the Democratic Party on the other side locked down longer and harder during COVID. So we can see that, yes, the Democratic Party is very much authoritarian. All right, let's look at, let's go back to the definition: forcible suppression of opposition. What is happening in recent events just the other day, or what is still going on, actually, I don't think it's been squashed yet, but the Manhattan District Attorney is trying to arrest Trump. Now, there is no way that you can convince me that this is not an attempt to forcibly suppress opposition. There's no way you can convince me that this is not an attempt to forcibly suppress opposition by trying to arrest Donald Trump. You can't. I mean, there's no way that you can convince me that this is an honest and true attempt to go after Donald Trump because he broke some law and he needs to be held accountable. It's not. It's not. This is an attempt to forcibly suppress opposition. So that's another example of how the Democratic Party are the fascists. So how about silencing dissent? Not too long ago, we have journalists like Schellenberger and Taibbi who are uncovering how government, especially on the Democratic side, with their government agencies such as the FBI, used big tech platforms such as Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and the like to silence opposition voices. That has been known for a long time now, but it's just until recently been revealed to be true. That the FBI has been in communication with Twitter prior to Elon Musk buying Twitter to ban accounts per politicians' requests, per FBI requests, to go into Twitter and say, hey, ban this account. It's that simple. That's exactly what has been happening. And that is an example of how the Democratic Party is silencing dissent. Let's talk about centralization. Here in the example of fascism, centralized autocracy is an example of fascism. If you were to separate the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, which one believes in a more central authority? The Democratic Party. Duh! The Democratic Party believes in a more central authority, and the Republican Party believes in a more decentralized authority. Again, I'm not saying the Republican Party is the answer. I'm not saying the Republican Party is not without corruption. It is. I really don't like a lot of things about the Republican Party, but the Democratic Party, the agenda of the Democratic Party needs to be stopped. And I believe right now that the first thing that we need to do to transfer power back to the people is stop the agenda of the Democratic Party. And at the same time, simultaneously, maybe reform the Republican Party or infiltrate from within and get those posers, those leeches, those morons, those people that have corrupted the Republican Party, just as they have the Democratic Party, get them out of office and hold them accountable so we can transfer power back to the people. But centralization is a part of fascism. In order to be a fascist, you have to believe in centralization. The Democratic Party believes in centralization, not decentralization. So that's why the Democratic Party are the fascists, not their enemy, not the Republican. I mean, like I said, there's people within the Republican Party that absolutely do believe in some tenets of fascism. But the Democratic Party is not fascists. Let's go over another example of what they accuse their enemy of what they are, and how they say you don't care about children. When the Democratic Party attacks like the Libertarians or the Republicans or the whatever and saying, you don't care about children and their education, you don't care about children. Well, the Democratic Party are the ones that are opposing school choice. The Democratic Party wants our kids locked into failing government schools. That's their way of taking care of the children, where school choice would free kids out of failing government schools. School choice would empower parents to make the best educational decision for their parents and equip them and empower them with funds to do so. It absolutely would. School choice is the answer to educational freedom, universal school access, to get kids in the best educational institution of their desire, whatever suits them best. But no, you have the Democrats that want children locked into failing government schools so we can use our tax dollars to fund public schools, which then fund teachers' unions, which then kicks back donations to the Democratic Party. That's why they oppose school choice. That's why they use language against us and say we don't care about the kids because why? What are you saying? No, you are the ones who don't care about the kids. You are the ones who want kids locked into failing government schools. You are the ones who don't care about the kids and their education and what's best for them. You only care about money. You are the ones who don't care about the kids. Let's go about the environment. You don't care about the environment. You hear that a lot from the Democratic Party. And when they attack their opposition, whoever their opposition, the Republicans, the Libertarians, whatever. But the Democratic Party turned their back on nuclear energy. Nuclear energy is one of the best ways to have clean, reliable, cheap, carbon-free emissions. That is the best way to produce energy and combating climate change at the same time. But no, we have these renewable energies that are not environmentally friendly. Building solar panels and batteries and electric cars is not environmentally friendly. Please get that, understand that. So here, there's an example number 3. Fascism was the first one. You don't care about the kids. Second one. Now the environment. They don't care about the environment. If they did care about the environment, they would be champion nuclear energy. They'd be building so many nuclear power plants. They'd be reactivating nuclear power plants. Here in California, we have one remaining active nuclear power plant that was originally scheduled to be decommissioned in 2025, but the Democrats had to swallow their pride and extend the life of the Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant, which accounts for 8 to 9% of the energy produced in California, to 2030. So if the Democrats really cared about the environment, they would be 100% behind nuclear, but they're not, because they're hypocrites and they accuse their enemy of what they actually are. You don't care about the needy. I already talked about that with welfare. They accuse their opposition. They accuse their enemy of not caring about the needy, but yet they are champions of government-assisted welfare. And if we abolish welfare and return assisting the needy to the private charities, more people can be helped easily, for cheaper. It's just a fact. There's so much waste, fraud, and abuse in government-run programs. We would be able to help more people easier, cheaper with private charities. That is a fact. So how about you don't care about kids' safety? You don't care about kids' safety. You just want kids to die by believing in your Second Amendment. But yet you don't hear any Democrat say we need to have armed security at schools. What's one of the best ways to prevent a mass shooting in schools? How about armed security? And the hypocrisy behind the Democrats is that they always go after the Second Amendment. They always want to put restrictions on the people's ability to carry arms, but yet how do they protect themselves? With armed security. It is the epitome of hypocrisy. They are what they accuse their enemy of. And this is why the Democratic Party is not what you think it is. It is a Marxist party. It's a communist party. Accuse your enemy of what you actually are to create confusion. And the last example that I'll give that I just thought about before I started filming was the whole kids in cages. Remember the whole kids in cages controversy? How they attacked Trump for the whole kids in cages controversy, but yet those cages were built during the Obama administration. It's just so mind-blowing when you start to understand this, when you start to realize that, yes, they are exactly what they accuse their enemy of. And then the goalposts removed. Oh, yeah, sure, Obama built the cages, but it was Trump that separated kids from parents. The goalposts. So again, other than accusing what their enemy of what they are, they constantly move the goalposts. Let's use the vaccines as an example of how they constantly move the goalposts. First, when the vaccines were first rolled out, 99% safe and effective. Then it went to like 95, then 90, then 80%, then 70%, then 60%, then 50%, whatever it is now. The goalposts are constantly moving with the Democratic Party or the ruling class or the psychopaths, the morons, the leeches that we refer to as elites, that we need to stop referring to as elites. They are not elites. They are psychopaths. They are morons. And when we start doing that, we will be able to take our power back. The last thing I want to talk about in this podcast is this tweet from Thomas Massey. If the Bill of Rights didn't exist, and if I were to offer those amendments on the floor of the House today, most Democrats would vote no on the Bill of Rights. No Democrat would have voted for the Second Amendment. Few would vote for the First, Fourth, Ninth, or 10th Amendments as worded. We're going to go over a few of those amendments in a second. But yeah, I agree. I agree with that 100%. So, quick history lesson. The Bill of Rights is a good thing. The Bill of Rights are the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. So when the Constitution was first introduced and first ratified, it didn't include the Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights came after that. It's the First Amendment that gives us our freedom of speech. The Bill of Rights doesn't give us our freedom of speech. We have freedom of speech. The Constitution and the Bill of Rights just documents that we have freedom of speech. Remember, the Constitution doesn't give us our rights. We have these rights. The Constitution just documents that we have these rights. But I digress. So, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of the press, all within the First Amendment. We'll go over that in a second. Right to bear arms, self-defense, okay, things like that. Decentralization of powers, that's the 10th Amendment. So yeah, I 100% agree that no Democrat today would vote for the Second Amendment that gives us, that documents our right to bear arms, which is our inherent right to self-defense. That's pretty important. The ability to defend yourselves and the ability to carry a firearm to defend yourself from a private citizen or a government that would attempt to infringe on your ability to live your life, infringe on your rights and your liberties. The Second Amendment is one of the most important amendments. It's probably the second most important amendment out there. That's why it's the Second Amendment. It is disheartening to know that very few, if no, Democrats today would vote for the Second Amendment if it was being introduced today. It would be full of amendments and regulations and one pistol, 8 rounds, something like that. Shotguns, no rifles. It's disheartening, to say the least. So that's the Second Amendment. Let's go backtrack. And Thomas Massey said few would vote for the first. So the First Amendment here is Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or of the right of the people to peaceably assemble, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So the 5 rights enumerated in the First Amendment are freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom of assembly, freedom of religion, and freedom to petition the government. So few Democrats would not vote for the First Amendment if it was written like that and introduced today. Would a few Republicans? Maybe. I don't know. But I would be willing to bet that the vast majority of Democrats today would not vote for that. We already covered the Second Amendment, and let's just go ahead and skip to the 10th Amendment. I firmly believe that very, very few, or let's just say I firmly believe that most Democrats today would not vote for the 10th Amendment, and it is one of the most important amendments out of them all. The power is not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. So, going back to the whole definition of fascism and why the Democrats are basically fascists today, because they believe in centralized authority as opposed to decentralized authority. The 10th Amendment just basically says decentralized authority, right? So the federal government was designed and created to have few and defined powers. Few and defined powers was our federal government's original purpose. And the 10th Amendment is just saying that any power not given to our federal government and written in the Constitution just defaults to the states and to the people. So if the Constitution does not specifically say the federal government has the power to do whatever, such as welfare, it automatically falls to the states and to the people to the handle. But the Democrats today are the fascists. They believe in centralized authority. I would be willing to bet a lot of money that most, if not all, Democrats today would have voted against the 10th Amendment if it were being introduced today. So for all of those reasons and many more, I firmly believe that one of the first things that we need to do to transfer power back to the people is stop the agenda of the modern-day Democratic Party. And again, that doesn't mean the Republican Party is the answer. That doesn't mean the Republican Party is without flaws or corruption. It has a lot of flaws. It has a lot of corruption. But there is a clear agenda from the Democratic Party to take power away from the people and transfer that to the state and transfer that power to a more centralized authority. I can get into digital currency, but I don't want to keep rambling on. Digital currency is buckle your seatbelts. Holy cow. That's going to be a fight to stop the onslaught of digital currency and our ability to be private. That's going to be troublesome, and that's coming around the corner. So the Democratic Party is not what you think it is. It is controlled by these fascists, these leeches, these morons. And many of these fascist leeches, morons, and psychopaths, yes, again, I will say it again and again and again, are within the Republican Party as well. So, for that reason and more, we need to stop the agenda of the Democratic Party. We need to infiltrate the Republican Party. Maybe even stop the Republican. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is with the Republican Party. Maybe we just need a third party out there, a fourth party, a fifth party to have equal footing. That would be a good idea. So we don't have this duopoly of powers. So we can stop choosing the lesser of two evils. I would like that. That would be awesome. But I think I've hammered my point across. The Democratic Party is not what you think it is. Today, it is not the JFK era of the Democratic Party. It is more fascistic, more authoritarian today. They are exactly what they accuse their enemy of. And with that, I will close it at that. Thank you for watching. Please give this video a like and subscribe to this channel if you like this message. This is episode 12 of Plea to Humanity, a podcast dedicated to transferring power back to the people. Thanks for watching.